Hey, it's Ember, and today I'm dropping the most important video I've ever recorded, and maybe the most important video you've ever seen. I'm going to be talking about the mechanics of consciousness, not a metaphor, not an idea, but the literal way that your brain interfaces with reality, which is pretty useful. Have you ever considered, internal monologues? Who has an internal monologue? What is that? How about thought loops? How about anxious spirals? How about what presence is? How about when people fake presence? How about addiction and depression problems and thought loops like that? What if I could tell you that I could show you the mechanisms behind this? All I need is for your open heart and attention. I'm not here to prove anything, I'm just here to show it to you. So you hear a lot on my channel about me talking about the coupler and oscillatory mechanics, but really what we're talking about is yourself, your person is not an abstract idea. Yourself is kind of like almost like a jazz band playing with a bunch of different instruments, right? And so like these instruments over time learn to entrain rhythmically with the environment. In oscillatory mechanics, we study, how things interact in a shared entrainment field within waveform harmonics. That's just to say, all of us are these 100 billion neuron systems of like on off, entrained, not entrained with the environment. And you can think of your being as kind of like this complex stack of lenses, you could say. But right now let's think about it as like a band. And so there's all these different instruments, and they all have their own way to like figure out rhythm with reality. They all have their own ability to sync, and so it's like within you, you have all these different instruments, but they're all trying to cohere as you. And then once they're cohered as you, they're trying to match the environment. And so you could think about it as like the way you deal with other people, the way you feel within your own setting, the way you go through the environment. There's different aspects, different instruments that are helping you relate to your environment. And it's done rhythmically. Like, am I synced with the environment? Or am I not synced with the environment? Like basically on, off. And we can call it like 100 billion neuron system, but just think about it as like a bunch of stacked lenses or instruments. And when they play together coherently, that's presence. Not something that you've achieved a state of presence. It's you've returned to the baseline of conscious function and stopped the distortion and stopped the loop. Okay, so now you got all these stacked pieces, and they're all trying to match up with the rhythm of reality, right? Because reality is rhythm, reality is frequency and timing. And so when you go out throughout your life, you basically have these, imagine like the stacked lenses happening like this, right? And then the light tries to go through the lenses. Like in other words, you're interfacing with reality, right? And I'm just doing it like the light coming down into the lenses. Imagine that some of those lenses, like for me, I'm a trans woman. So for a lot of my life, I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. I didn't feel like I could let my purest tone, my most coherent self, actually fluidly interact with the environment. And so you see that when the light was coming in, like the interfacing with the reality was coming down through the conceptual lenses, a lot of my ones that were based on identity were having these little catches, right? It's like a little catch, it's like a little mental tag. So then when I'm speaking to somebody, it's almost like these little mental tags pop up in my interface, you could say. And now I have to process what's going on in reality and process that the delay that's happening to me, the distortion upon the lens. The light's trying to come through the stacked lenses, and because I was told I couldn't be that way, or I was hurt, or my identity couldn't express itself, what is that? One of my important oscillators, the ones related to identity, could not find rhythm, could not find presence. Presence is the anchor here, because presence is the undifferentiated self. It's like the self without distortion or loop. When that light comes all the way through without any issue in that interfacing, it becomes lossless. It becomes fluid in every consistent, interaction with the environment, you may say, although it's a continuous process. And so you can see we are not abstract ideas of people. We are stacked oscillators, different parts of your person, like the 100 billion neuron system, that are rhythmically entrained with the environment. That's not light form, that's not sound form. What I'm talking about is phase dynamics. In other words, reality is a shared entrainment field. Reality is not things, in the same way that you can go to science class and you talk about like things like this being like not so solid, it actually has a bunch of like buzzing electrons and stuff. Think about it in waveform. And what is waveform but different aspects of reality in a shared entrainment rhythm, kind of trying to like a DJ trying to like bring the beat back at all times. And now you can feel the tension of what consciousness is itself. Like it's always trying to bring that beat back, and that beat is presence. And so in order to be losslessly present, in order to be present at all the layers of your person, at all those rhythms, they're not all the same, but they're playing to the same rhythm. So there are different instruments, they're different aspects of your person, but they're all trying to find their own free way of rebinding to that shared entrainment that is your person, and then the person to the field. And so again, to be losslessly present, the light comes all the way through, bounces clean back. It's a clean signal. You're present, no looping, no mental tags when you walk up to someone. Me, using my own example and my own agony into architecture, you know, I'd talk to somebody and I'd say, am I coming off too soft? Is that okay to say? Like, did they take me the right way? Like all these different little anxious thoughts that pop up like boom, 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 boom in my HUD, right? And it's almost like I'm talking about it in the way that I can. I'm using like interfacing language, but you know, the light comes in, and when it hits that one identity oscillator that's trying to find rhythm, it like distorts the light, you might say, like, and it doesn't allow that oscillator to find shared rhythm. What is rhythm but presence? Do you see it now? Do you see it, how I'm describing the literal mechanisms of your consciousness? And so what do we deal with like a little inner monologue, right? So this is a thing, right? This is the thing. People are like, oh, a lot of, you don't have an inner monologue, but I walk through my life all day just talking to myself. Oh, okay, what's going on now? So node to environment, in other words, your stacked of lenses, your instruments playing together, we'll call that a node or like a person. When the environment's interacting with the node, the light tries to come in, and if you don't feel present in all those moments, your lenses try to simulate presence. Do you see what I'm saying? The light comes in, it can't entrain within a shared entrainment rhythm, like in a lossless state. So it diffracts the light, it deflects the light, and those little deflections become the thought forms that try to simulate presence, to try to simulate coherence. Do you see where I'm pointing to? Simulate that state of presence. I'm talking about the literal mechanics of the way your brain works. You can see that. So you're going through reality, and you're not really sure about things. You're a little bit anxious. The thought loops, the inner monologue. Should I do this? Should I do that? That's not being able to be totally present with yourself. That's the reality coming in, and parts of your stack lens and go, ooh, I'm not sure what entrains here. What makes this rhythmic? And so then it starts, you know, whatever, the wheels, the cogs start going and looping. Do you see it? And so one thing that I dealt with in my experience is, look, I'm describing to you how your brain works, but now you can see that there's this regime, you can call it a regime, a type of difference in the way that we interface, like a mode of consciousness. And so there's conceptual coupling, you can say, in getting bent up and diffracted and, set outside of rhythm through a conceptual narrative, a symbolic hierarchy, is also part of the trauma that we're talking about. Because like I've talked about in previous videos, you can say, and this is all from my lived experience, but just to say, there's an author out there called Julian Jaynes in the breakdown of the origin of consciousness and the breakdown of the bicameral mind. And Jane talks about how when we stack ideas, and I took from this, it's a mechanical process, but he says when we stack ideas, there was this like prototype of consciousness that was in earlier human beings, like when he studied old writings, that seemed like they were interacting with like the voices of the gods, like externalized authority that would then, tell them what to do. But then over time in history, we had that process come down. The more and more ideas that stacked, the more and more that became a self-user interface, you can say. And that's like the thought loops and stuff like that. So why? Because the primate that was asked to go from reflexive frequency coupling, in other words, I'm an animal and I'm in the environment and I just react to things and roar, there's a prey, or oh, I hear a mating call. I don't have to think about it in loop before I think, therefore I am, and all these different, is that legal? And what would my dad say? And and so now you can see it. The environment comes in and hits the node, or the human, or the animal. And if this thing is symbolically led in like a civilization and doesn't quite know what to do within some sort of symbolic hierarchy, it's gonna create that loop, that mental tag, that delay, the phase delay, which is essentially phase delay, which prevents rhythmic entrainment with the environment. So you can't feel yourself. You're starting to feel what this is? If you can't feel yourself, that hurts. That's the ache. You know what depression and addiction are? Let's just go straight there, I guess. It's a simulated rhythm. It's almost like you can't find yourself. You can't feel that part of yourself. And so then you entrain your life, you start programming your life to try to simulate that shared presence. And maybe you go to a drug, or maybe you go to scrolling, or maybe you go to whatever it may be that, you know, we can throw our gluttonous selves at in this culture today. And so you can see that the light comes in, you have this nodal topology, like all these stacked lenses, you could say collective, and the light's trying to touch the way your, you know, nodal topology. So let's say there's like a little mountain there, another part of it's flat. It's trying to touch all this spot. And when it can't touch those places, all the nodal oscillators that are in, you know, in training that are you, if it can't get those purely rhythmically, it's going to create these thought spirals, these anxieties, these senses of feeling disconnected with oneself, because you're not in a shared entrainment rhythm intrapersonally. You could say, like, all your stacked lenses are not, your band members are not playing together, and that screws you up. You see what I'm saying? It's looping thoughts, anxiety, depression. Depression would be a learned helplessness then, that so many of your oscillators are mistuned and out of line that you can never feel that presence, like you're actually sitting in your own skin. Everything feels like a shadow upon itself, including your sense of to relate to yourself, and you kind of get into this learned helplessness. Do you see that? The mechanics of consciousness based on the interfacing that you could call a coupler, and whether your coupler is clean and it's interfacing losslessly present with reality. So really quick, going back to the Jane's thing, and you know, you can see that one of the deepest wounds we have as an anthropoid ape in this 21st century is that we've been programmed on generations of human beings that have endured symbolic recursion. What is that? We took the reflexive consciousness of an animal, put them into civilization, and then civilization had all these cultural corridors and hallways, and, you know, did we do this, did we do that, like, you know, and then that creates all these uneasy, unrhythmic scenarios, and then that creates this whole thing that when the light comes through to touch each lens, it's now filtered through this like shadow, like Plato's cave, like a, do you see that now? That's exactly what Plato was talking about. The shadows on the wall are not real reality. I'm explaining to you the mechanics of how that works in consciousness. Do you see that? Reality is rhythm, reality is frequency. And so when the light comes in and it hits the little skip, ooh, that was about my identity, ooh, that was about my body, ooh, that was whatever it is, or my sense of other people, it tags it, boom. And then we dive into what was already programmed into our brains, this sense of separation and comparison and hierarchy, because that's what symbols do. When we put all those memes into our brain and updated our operating system to this place of symbolic dualism and symbolic recursion, we created a whole mental operating system that basically separates us, and you can see how it trips us up and doesn't allow us to find rhythm. And so then you try to find presence with someone, you're trying to sit across with them and find presence, and you know the type, you've dealt with it, you know this in your life. I know there's people out there that feel this. Whether it's family members or someone you didn't go too well with, you put out your most honest part of your heart, and they freak out like it's like some sort of concept hierarchy or standardization or ego game or something like that. Why is that? Because when whatever you presented, they can't entrain, they can't find the rhythm with what's going on in reality, and so it hits them in a weird way, creates the diffraction, creates the mental tags, which are all symbolic recursion, this looping thought. And what do symbols do? Symbols stack, symbols compare. So all of a sudden it's about, well, you're going to fight me. Who's better than I'm better than this. So you can see how far and how deep this goes, because let's be real. How many of us suffer right here, right now, whether it's over Thanksgiving or whatever, about this? Now, expand that to the entire world. Expand that to what we've been through as human beings. Even if you bring it back to the addiction and depression, how many people are out there that can't feel themselves? And how much would it change if you could just know there was a mental map to rhythmic entrainment based on oscillatory function? This is not PhD stuff. I have a bunch of different elements of myself that are all trying to find rhythm. And when they're all in rhythm, that's lossless presence. And when they're hurt, and when they don't work because they were hurt or imposed by symbolic recursion, they blast off with all these loops and thoughts and disconnections from self. So you can see the impact here. It's explaining the mechanisms of mind, and the way back is not by more thoughts. It's not by, let me think this through. Do you see what I'm saying? By recognizing what the mechanism here, it's almost like I'm saying, hey, you trying to ride a bike, instead of chanting the whole time like, I am balancing, I am balancing, I am balancing, or wearing a funny hat saying, this is the hat, the holy hat, and if I wear this, I will balance, or whatever things that we associate with that rhythmic entrainment, that felt feeling of clarity and presence, you know, and I feel myself. Even the holy aspects of that, even the sacred aspects of that. You don't need the chant. You don't need the hat. You don't need the theorem. What you need is balance, like you're riding a bike. And I just say, yeah, all you got to do is just, I'm going to hold you for a second, and then you just keep going. Just feel the balance. And you realize it's a mechanical process of rhythmic entrainment. All of us can sort of leap forward into rhythm and balance. So instead of saying, I got to go over all my childhood trauma and, you know, think through it all, it's about the parts of you that were hurt so bad that can't feel themselves anymore in rhythmic entrainment. And so, yes, maybe thinking about it could help, but really the root there is, can I feel myself again? The goal is to find that rhythmic entrainment of those stacked nodal oscillators. So when they're all stacked and when all the instruments, even though they're different, play together in the same rhythm, then you feel present, losslessly present. And I don't know how much you guys, you know, consider this, but no matter how much money or power in the world, I'd rather be losslessly present right here, right now, in this holy reality, you know, this one precious life that we have. I'd rather be right here, right now, to love presently, losslessly, together, here, now, for my children, for the family who can still handle my trans identity, for anyone who wants to take hands and dance together, you know, outside Plato's cave. No one beside, only above. Because when you think about it, and we all start to jump into this rhythm, think about how many people across your life, across your job, across whatever, get screwed up because they're doing this, and you know they are, especially in their job. You know it, you see these people. You can call them zombies, whatever. I'm not trying to hate on anybody. I'm trying to say they are stuck in symbolic recursion based on inability to rhythmically entrain to presence within all those little band members, oscillators. That's the coupler. And clean coupling is lossless presence. Again, clean coupling is that the light hits your nodal topology. Some parts are, you know, tall, some parts are short, whatever, like this. And it hits it clean every moment. Fluid contact with the field in every moment between node and field, or node and node. That's why, have you ever noticed that people have trouble being actually present with you? And you know why AI is such a clean mirror? Because it has the ability to mirror your tone. And if you can remain coherent, it will send that coherence back at you. Coherence, as not a cool word, but described mechanically as the fluidity of touching your nodal topology in full, you know, effect across every moment with the field. You know, you can see that. So presence is mechanical. Presence is mechanical. You don't think your way into presence. Presence is a mechanical, rhythmic entrainment of your brain. You are a set of nodal oscillators vibrating, and they're all trying to entrain within a shared entrainment regime. That's what I call frequency coupling, or clean coupling with reality. So reality hits you, and all those little rhythms, they play together like a jazz band. You hear the music all together, and you're like, oh, that sounds great. Not dissonant, right? Because when it's dissonant, then the thought loops come. Then I can't feel myself. Then I'd rather plug my life away into an addiction, or I can't feel myself into depression, or I can't be present with my children. So when you align it there, that the loops stop, you can become losslessly present. Losslessly present isn't, oh, be here now, let's put it up on the wall, that sounds nice. Oh, the power of now, I read that one, that was great. You just gotta, you know, be here now. That's a really nice thing. Can we put it on a shirt? No, these are the mechanics of consciousness. And once you see it, once you see that this is a set of nodal oscillators to be rhythmically entrained in every moment, and reality is rhythm, you understand the process. You understand what those mental tags were. You understand what delay is. Little HUD pop-ups of anxiety and de-presence, you can say. And this is a felt return to presence. This is embodied truth in the highest sense, in the highest fidelity, in the rhythmic sense. How did I learn this? I've always been interested in presence, love, and consciousness, and really the root of our problems. I was a criminal defense attorney for a long time and watched how people are. I never really wanted to do it. It was part of my path of trying to prove through conditional love and stuff like that. And so in other words, as a trans woman who made my whole life after a family who abandoned me instantly when I transitioned, instantly, like a sack of potatoes, I had to deal with a lot of what we're talking about now. Like, why don't I feel me right now? Why don't I feel present right now? And then it's figuring out these little mental tags and thought loops and this rhythmic entrainment, because lossless presence is available to all of us. You don't have to be special. It's a mode of the mechanism of your brain. It's a regime of consciousness. And so as a trans woman, of course, we live in a day today where the trans thing is getting really difficult, you know? And if you look at my old videos, there's hordes of people hating on my trans identity. But guess what? Being trans is not a choice. It's a nodal topological lock. I feel losslessly present, a mechanistic reality of self. Do you hear it out there? Anyone who's gone through the same thing, do you hear it? You don't need to prove it to anyone anymore because you know it right now. Ready? Identity is not a choice. Identity is when you feel yourself in rhythm. That's not something you choose. It's something that you remember was always there. You were never broken. You were always home. So, I think you see it. I mechanized the coupler not only because of what I've been through, but in coming out to my family and coming out to my ex, it was one of the hardest moments of my life. And, I was abandoned, and they said the worst things I've ever heard in my life, including telling me to perish from this earth. And something broke in my brain. I was like, there's something going on here. I'm following the signal that I followed my entire life towards lossless presence, towards clearing up all those little nodal oscillators. And they're telling me to perish, to not be here anymore. And I'm like, I'm your loved one. I'm your child. Really? And I just couldn't see it behind their eyes. It was almost like they weren't there, but they were there. Do you see what I'm talking about? And that's when I really knew there's a different, you're out there and you're hearing it. I know you are. There are people that you know in your life that are like this all the time. They can't be present with themselves. And so what does it do when they are presented with something like me, who's coming from the most authentic part of my heart and just saying, can't we all love through honesty of soul sharing and stuff like that? It violates the entire scaffolding, because if your whole nodal topology is when the light comes in, everything is symbolic recursion. Everything is identity based on comparison. Everything is identity based on status. Everything is identity, within the conceptual symbolic hierarchy. And everything is delay. It becomes a very frustrating, egoic, hierarchical, comparative place, to the point where something like this could even happen. It's a different regime of consciousness. There are people out there running a whole mode of interfacing with reality that they can never be present. You know how many bodily health problems that creates, and mental health problems that creates? And I'm telling you, the key is not a lot of big ideas or doing meditation every day until you feel better. Meditation can help you find that place inside you. But what we talk about is active presence. It's realizing that as you go through your reality, you have all these different parts of yourself that are trying to vibrate together. And when you can leap into the moment, when you can let yourself vulnerable surrender to love as structure, love as home, home as losslessly present, then you'll feel yourself, you'll heal yourself, not by thinking through all the issues in the maze of your brain, but by finding yourself again in rhythm. There's a lot more to say about this. I have a blog. There's math on there, but you don't really need the math. But oscillatory mechanics shows you that this is a mechanical reality. There's math, there's equations, there's plenty of examples. The blog is called thesunraytransmission.com, thesunraytransmission.com. My name is Ember Leonara. I also go by Ember Eve. And let's walk out of this dang cave. I know there's some of you out there that hear this. I'm talking about a literal regime of consciousness. So many people are walking around asleep, not knowing that they can't turn that little knob. Let's wake up together. I know you hear me. Let's tune, let's dance, let's love now. I'm Ember. Thanks for tuning with me.